11. April 1968. West Berlin, Kochstrasse. A policeman in his 30s writes on the back of an incident form, "My father wore this uniform for Hitler. My son calls me a fascist. I was only trying to keep order." It is a dangerous line. It could not be spoken on a loudspeaker truck. It could not be argued in a meeting with the Senator of the Interior. It could not be shouted at students and journalists and foreign observers who knew the slogans better than the files. It is a thesis in 14 words. It is the mathematics of a life lived between uniforms. He is Karl, son of a city that burned twice. He will be reduced to initials in archives. He will be a face behind a visor in films taken from the pavement. He will be a signature on use of force reports and a voice in oral histories gathered decades later. He thinks in short sentences. He writes in short sentences. He was trained to. The papers later collect accounts. A baton lifted above a student's head. A chant, unter den Talaren, Muff von 1000 Jahren. A call back to Hamburg the previous November. To halls and gowns and the mustiness of 1,000 years. To the accusation that institutions had not been disinfected, but merely dusted. A policeman is an institution. Between the raised baton and the line on the incident form lies a quarter century. The arithmetic of rubble, ration cards, questionnaires. The algebra of guilt without judgment and memory without monuments. The calculus of order. 8 May 1945, Berlin. Neukölln. The boy Karl is 14. The sound of artillery has hushed to occasional blasts set off by sappers. There is smoke. There is silence. There is the metallic taste of dust. Bundesarchiv photographs show women in headscarves carrying bricks in the sun. They will be named later, Trümmerfrauen. At the time, they are mothers, aunts, widows, girls with bare arms and scarves pinning down hair shaved in the cold months. The rubble is not history yet. It is an obstacle. Occupation Authority reports describe rubble landscapes. The language is intentionally dry. Street clearance proceeding at reduced rates due to lack of fuel, inadequate equipment, and extensive mine hazards. The sentences are built like bridges and stop short at blown spans. In survey after survey, the words recur: lack, inadequate, extensive. The boy's father is a policeman before the collapse. Ordnungspolizei, Schutzpolizei in the city. A uniform that carried the authority of the state through brown years. A uniform photographed in parades and on raiding parties and in municipal offices where paper could make a life or unravel it. In 1945, that uniform is a liability. It is burned. It is buried. It is remade into a coat turned inside out for winter. The father had gone east for a time. He returned with a limp and a story that was all passive voice. He returned with a piece of paper stamped by a Soviet commandant that said, "Released." He said nothing about the other papers he might have signed. In the days after capitulation, there is no police in the traditional sense. There are armed patrols in different languages. There are curfews posted on gutted walls. There are men in long coats who ask questions and write down names. There are tribunals, and there are kitchens. The occupation reports set out the rules. A curfew at 2,000 hours, no gatherings, no radios unless registered, weapons to be turned in. The words are printed on broadsheets and pasted to corners. Everybody learns the new mathematics, aphorisms converted to ration lines, curfews converted to quiet survival. The first winter is hard. The first winter is not yet the hunger winter that will enter schoolbooks later, but for many it is the first time the mother has to decide whether to trade a wedding ring for fat. The boy Karl learns the arithmetic of calories. He learns that cigarettes are currency. American cigarettes are more valuable than those rolled from newspaper and sweepings. A good cigarette can be a knife or a kilo. Occupation reports in English. Note, cigarette-based exchange economy operates with dollar-like stability. Fragebogen, questionnaires. The new German word of 1945 is actually an old German word made heavy. 50-some questions become 31 in some zones. The Sprüchkammern will need evidence, and evidence will arrive as marks on paper and impressions gathered in interviews. The father fills one out in a schoolroom with half the roof missing. Were you ever a member of the NSDAP? Yes. If yes, when did you join? And what was your member number? He writes the number as if it were a vaccination date. Were you a member of any affiliated organizations? He writes, SA never, SS never, SS never, HJ not applicable. Did he donate to party funds? Probably. Did he attend meetings? Compulsory. Did he order arrests? I was only following orders. Already the grammar returns him to safety. The Sprüchkammer will grade him. Categories are invented to cope with the flood. Hauptschuldig, minder belastet, Mitläufer, entlastet. Major offenders, offenders, lesser offenders, followers, exonerated. 1/3 of a generation will become Mitläufer. The majority of files will end with a stamp that says entlastet, so that offices can reopen and papers can move from one desk to another faster than trains had moved them to the east. The mathematics of guilt will be a ledger that never balances. Who goes to prison? A few. Who loses pensions? A few. Who hides in the countryside until the wind shifts? Many. Who returns to office desks quietly by 1948? Many more. Sprüchkammer files from Berlin list cases of policemen who are temporarily relieved. They list affidavits signed by neighbors and priests. He was a decent man. He protected us against denunciations. They list dates of membership, reinterpreted as debts paid. They list wives arriving with children in their arms, not to testify, but to be an argument. The judges start with zeal and end with exhaustion. The allies start with principles and end with priorities. Washington cables speak bluntly. Public administration must be staffed. Security concerns now include Soviet intentions. Denazification should not prevent essential services. The arithmetic of justice is reduced by the geometry of the Cold War. 1946-47. The hunger winter. The coal does not arrive. It is blocked on the lines or stolen or burned before it leaves. This is not crime as a story, it is arithmetic. A ton of coal splits across 50 apartments, and each family burns the last piece on New Year's Day. Children develop a vocabulary for degrees Celsius. Frost sits in the hallways. Kitchens were never warm in winter. Now they are uninhabitable. In Berlin, American lorries cross bridges with careful weight limits. In the British zone, trucks carry sacks of flour with placards attached. Relief shipment. Some sacks are photographed with Marshall Plan markings later. In 1947, the plan is still a set of memoranda and an idea that Europe must not starve if it is to be stable. The mathematics of the Marshall Plan will become the arithmetic of full shelves. For now, it is Boots stepping through drifts to collect an extra sack of potatoes from an uncle in Brandenburg that may not be there when you arrive. In a park in Zehlendorf, a camp of displaced persons goes up. Jewish survivors, a few Poles, Ukrainians, slave laborers who had worked in Berlin factories and were freed by the war's end with no homes to return to. Allied intelligence summaries place tens of thousands in Berlin camps. Schlachtensee, Hallensee. The names sound serene. The huts look temporary. The people inside are a new kind of neighbor. Contact is awkward and often avoided. Denial is a habit. Domestic life shrinks to the stovetop and the queue. A cloth pulled over an apartment doorframe to preserve the heat for the room where the family sleeps becomes a curtain drawn against stories told in a language you do not want to learn. We did not know, a phrase spoken so often in post-war interviews that it becomes an incantation. Some did not know about the precise logistics, many knew enough to have known. Allied film reels are shown in cinemas with the instruction, compulsory attendance. Some adults cover their children's eyes. Some adults look away. Some thank the projector for flickering out due to bad wiring. Carl is 15 when he brings a piece of bread to the fence of a DP camp. A young man inside looks at him as if he were a messenger or an accuser. Neither speaks the other's language. Carl sets the bread down and walks away and tells no one. Years later, in oral history, he will say, "I set it down and did not wait to see if he took it." In the files, there is no notation of this act. In the files, there is no notation of this act. In the mathematics of memory, it is a small number with no place in the ledger but a weight all the same. 20. June 1948. Currency reform in the three Western zones and West Berlin. The Deutschmark appears like a clean shirt on a washed but still shivering body. The black market collapses in an afternoon. Cigarettes lose their centrality. Smiles appear on faces in bakeries. Shelves that had been empty are suddenly not so empty. The arithmetic of scarcity begins to give way to the arithmetic of choice. 24 June 1948. The Soviet blockade of West Berlin. The airlift begins. Tempelhof fills with planes. Children learn new words, Rosinenbomber. The mathematics of the airlift is printed in newspapers, tons per day, flights per hour, calories per person per week. Carl stands with thousands at the end of runways. He sees men toss candy bars attached to handkerchief parachutes. He hears the labor in engines. He runs to catch a parachute and does not. He watches as older men, former enemies, now defending a cargo ramp, wave at pilots who lean out windows and smile. In this atmosphere of lines drawn in chalk and air, the West begins to congeal into institutions. The basic law is drafted. Bonn will be the capital. Police are needed in a place where the sector border is both a line and a frontier. 1950. Berlin. Police. Presidium recruiting brochures. Promise a new beginning and a new uniform. The uniform is not entirely new. The cut is different. The insignia are different. The men inside are often the same. Continuity disguised as renovation. The mathematics of staffing again. Carl is 19. He has hands that can lift sandbags and a face that makes older women say, "We could use your strength on the rubble heap." He has also a father whose denazification file lists Mitläufer. He has a mother who fears the next winter more than she fears the past. He has a sense that order is a good. He has seen what happens when it collapses. He joins the police because it is a job and a calling. He signs papers. He is issued a baton and a cap. He is given courses in democratic policing. The instructors are men who underline certain words. They do not talk much about 1938 or 1941. They talk about 1848. They quote the basic law. They underline proportionality. The training files include a section titled Avoidance of Political Abuse. The older men snort privately. The younger men listen and memorize. The new oath includes the Constitution. The old habits include the reflex to stand in a particular way when superiors enter. In the barracks, the jokes have the same structure as jokes told 10 years earlier, but different names in the punchlines. In the pub after shift, there are two types of veterans, those who speak of the last war and those who never mention it. A sergeant known for clean boots has a scar on his upper lip and a habit of looking past you when he speaks. He is identified in a personnel file as served in occupied Poland. He is promoted in 1952. He is retired in 1971. The personnel file records No disciplinary irregularities. 17. June 1953. Workers' uprising in the east. Karl is posted near the sector border. An internal report notes his platoon observed troop movements of Soviet units. The sensation is of being adjacent to history without authoring it. Over loudspeakers, a voice reads statements. Over the border, people are arrested. Karl remembers a man in a shirt with rolled sleeves waving and then running. He does not know what became of that man. He remembers the taste of dust in 1945 and thinks it is the same dust. The 1950s are Adenauer and economic growth. They are refrigerators arriving in kitchens like ships, glossy and modern. They are men who had applied for pensions under old categories receiving new ones. They are school books that focus on burned cities and starving refugees. They are memorial days for the expellees, the Vertriebene who came from Silesia and East Prussia with cartloads and stories. They are mass housing projects built on fringes of cities with stairwells that echo and doors that close. Bavaria and Lower Saxony receive millions of expellees. Schleswig-Holstein's population swells. In West Berlin, the numbers are different, the pressures peculiar. Refugees from the GDR add to the mix. The arithmetic of scarce rooms is merciless. Tenements meant for families of 5 house 12. Shared kitchens create shared resentments. They take our jobs. They bring their customs. We suffer too. The pronouns are bending and reshaping. The politics follows the math. A Bund der Vertriebenen office opens in Karl's precinct. He patrols outside when they hold rallies. He hears the placards demand recognition, and the politicians offer it in measured speeches. Large ceremonial monuments to German suffering go up. Small private markers of absent Jews rarely do. A local history pamphlet in Berlin in 1956 lists the bombing dates and the dead and names the fallen soldiers. It does not list the names of deported families. In the 1950s, if you know, you know. If you do not, you will not be told by the schoolbook in your lap. Allied intelligence summaries from the period note a fragile equilibrium predicated on economic improvement and political moderation. The summaries also note continuity of personnel in legal, police, and administrative sectors may compromise long-term democratic consolidation. In Bonn, ministers read the first sentence aloud, the second they underline but put aside. The Cold War is consolidating. It will require strong institutions. The arithmetic of trade-offs is again at work. Karl marries in 1956. A son is born in 1958. His name is Stefan. The boy will later become a long-haired student with a sharp tongue and sharper questions. He will earn bruises on his forearms at demonstrations and call his father by his first name to cancel the authority of Papa. He will care for his father in old age. Life is a tangle of arithmetic and affection. 1961. The wall goes up. The files call it a barrier. The people call it the wall. Karl's shift that Sunday begins routine and ends in a long night. Concrete appears where there had been crossings. Families are divided along lines drawn by guards overnight. A woman in pajamas looks out a window across a gap and then sees a man with a shovel fill it. She cries and calls a name. He does not look up. He needs to finish before dawn. Karl's platoon receives orders. Maintain calm on the western side. Prevent breaches that could cause bloodshed. Coordinate with Allied military units. They watch as the East makes a point. This is permanent. The mathematics of sectors becomes geometry in pourable form. The Cold War's line is no longer chalk. It is rebar inside a history that will last longer than his career. By 1962, the boy Stefan is in school. He learns about the wall. He learns about economic miracles. He does not learn the word Sobibor. He does not hear the name of local perpetrators. He hears about bombs in Hamburg and air raids in Berlin and millions of German expellees. His school celebrates new gym equipment. His father shrugs when asked about the war. It was bad. He does not add, I watched neighbors disappear. He does not add, my father wore this uniform. The silence is not an admission or an absolution. It is a fact and a function. 1963-65. Auschwitz trials in Frankfurt. Television broadcasts images of men in the dock. They are not monsters. They are office clerks, policemen, accountants, doctors. They look like your father and your uncle. They speak like your teacher. For the first time, many Germans see men who did things someone else told them to and are now speaking and sweating in front of microphones. The nationality of guilt becomes internal. Karl watches with his wife. He fidgets. He says, some things should have been punished earlier. He changes the channel to a feature about new car models. He is not disinterested. He is entangled and trying to live. The student movement gathers. The SDS and small groups of reading circles and activists. They study Marx and Marcuse and the Frankfurt School. They print posters with fonts and faces that become their own language. They picket the Springer Building, accuse a media empire of aligning with the old and the authoritarian. They chant, chant, chant. They scan faces of policemen and see in the lines not the basic law but the mustiness of 1,000 years. Rudi Dutschke walks down Kurfürstendamm as if he owns the street. He is shot on 11 April 1968 by a man who read the papers and thought he was defending something that did not need defending. Blood on the ground. A bike, a jacket. The city erupts. Springer raus! Ho 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 Chi Minh! Unter den Talaren! Muf von 1000 Jahren! The slogan originated in Hamburg the previous November, used by two students, Bornmann and Szymanski, who unfurled a banner during a rector's inauguration. It moved like a rumor across cities. It arrives in Karl's ear as an accusation that denies the difference between his father's uniform and his own. He knows there is a difference. He also knows there is continuity. He feels both and cannot articulate the mathematics on the street. Archival directives issued by the Berlin Police Presidium in spring 1968 instruct careful force, measured dispersal, avoidance of escalation. The line officers are told to use batons when necessary, to avoid head strikes, to document injuries, to avoid photographs. A memo from the Senator of the Interior underlines that the world is watching. A memo from a precinct captain notes, men lack training in crowd psychology. Many rely on instincts formed under different regimes. The handwriting is neat. Heinrich Boll writes an essay about the Germany of 1968. He speaks of the need for new honesty. His words are read in Karl's precinct by a clerk with glasses who says, he is calling us war criminals. The clerk's father died at Stalingrad. The clerk's cousin is an engineer in the East. The clerk shrugs. In a use of force report dated 12 April 1968, Karl writes, at 19,010 hours at Kochstrasse Zimmerstrasse, encountered approximately 200 demonstrators blocking access to building. Issued dispersal orders. Received projectiles, stones and paint bags. Deployed Baton to chest and arms of resisting subjects. No firearm discharged. No injuries observed requiring immediate medical attention. The language is learned. The sentiment beneath is simple. This is my job. An occupation of a university building ends with a negotiated exit. The police wait outside. The chant echoes off lintels older than the Republic. Unter den Talaren, The gown is a symbol as surely as a uniform is. Students accuse professors of being the silent sons of war criminals. The professors call them insolent. The police stand in corridors and think of their own fathers. A document in the Bundesarchiv, a report on police personnel in the 1950s, notes, continuity in middle ranks remains significant. Political reliability assessed through questionnaires and supervisory evaluations, thorough replacement impractical. There it is in bureaucratic font, the continuity. It stands behind Karl like a second shadow. It is the arithmetic of functions. A society requires enforcement of laws. The men available to enforce them are the men available. The difference in regimes is written in statutes and training. It is not always written in reflex. That spring and summer, West Germany sees emergency laws proposed. The Notstandsgesetze, the grand coalition of SPD and CDU support. Students see Weimar dying a second time in the doings of men who remember the first time. They do not believe the guarantees that abusers will not abuse again. They have read too many files, discovered too many judges and professors with brown pasts reinstated. In Karl's notebook after his shift on 11 April 1968, he writes the line that opens this account. He writes it because he has been called Nazi on the street by a boy not much older than his son. He writes it because he saw his father's hands shaking as he filled out a Sprüchkammer form 20 years earlier. He writes it because the baton is still in his hands when he sits and the weight transfers to the pen. My father wore this uniform for Hitler. Precise and painful. The continuity acknowledges itself. Not in ideology, but in fabric and roles. A uniform that commands space in the street. A cap that organizes a crowd. A baton that equalizes height and youth. My son calls me a fascist. Domestic crisis mirrors political discourse. Family meals become small parliaments with no rules of order and no coalition partners. The boy Stefan says, "You were on the wrong side of the police line." Karl says, "There is only one line." The wife says nothing. "I was only trying to keep order." The creed of the policeman since the first city decided to name men to enforce. In 1938, in 1941, order was used to justify crimes. In 1968, order is used to maintain streets and protect property. The word is the same. The contexts are different. The student on the sidewalk cannot pass those contexts in the swing of a baton. He sees only a helmet and hears only boots. The policeman cannot pass the chants into concerns in that he sees only a boundary and hears only instructions. The historical record will show both, the chants and the reports, the slogans and the memos, the tear gas and the bills passed, the continuity and the change. After the riots at the Springer Building, internal reviews identify excessive use of force in certain units. Disciplinary actions are taken against a handful of officers. A training program on proportional response is designed by a psychologist who quotes American manuals. The old sergeant with the scar calls it nonsense. He retires 3 years later and takes a photograph of himself in uniform out of the frame at home and puts a picture of grandchildren in its place. The arithmetic of a new democracy resting on unspoken bargains is not written in law but felt in the city. The Allies withdraw progressively from involvement in internal policing. German courts restrict the government where necessary. The Constitutional Court becomes a new kind of authority. The press multiplies. A magazine prints an exposé on an ex-judge with a Nazi past sitting in a high court. He resigns. Others stay. The mathematics of who to expose and who to leave is extensive and inconsistent. By the 1970s, memory begins to shift institutionally. Memorials to the deported are planned. School books are revised. Students read about perpetrators and numbers. They read dates and names that had been missing. The DP camps are long gone, their inhabitants scattered to new countries or living quietly. A plaque goes up near Schlachtensee. A bench in Tiergarten is dedicated to those who did not return. The graffiti on a wall in Kreuzberg says, "Vergiss nicht." Do not forget. Karl is older now. He walks slower. He puts on a different uniform in winter, a heavy coat that barely fits. He reads newspapers and shakes his head at new things he does not understand, and his son laughs and says, "We did not understand your batons either." The friendship between father and son is possible because they both lived long enough for their differences to be partially metabolized. Time does not absolve, it transforms. In the files, the entry thin. The 1968 reports are boxed and labeled. The personnel folders are closed with string and placed on shelves. Occupation reports yellow. Allied summaries are declassified. Oral histories are collected by young scholars in reading rooms where heaters hum through winter. The voices are recorded on machines that click when tapes change. The questions are careful. The answers are sometimes careful and sometimes blunt. Karl sits at a kitchen table with a student in 1995. He says, "We were in the street because that was our work. Many of us had fathers who had put on the uniform for the wrong government. We thought we were different. We were different. We were also the same men." It is complicated. The student nods and writes. Complicated is a human word that hides arithmetic that cannot be printed. He tells a story to the student about 1945. The bread on the fence. He says, "I do not know if he took it. I have thought about that more than about most things I did with my baton." The student is silent. The recorder whirs. He tells the student about the 1948 airlift. He says, "You do not forget that sound." He tells the student about the hunger winter and the first refrigerator. He tells the student about the emergency laws and how he thought they were necessary in theory and wondered about them in practice. He shows the student the document he wrote. The line on the back of the incident form from 11 April 1968. He kept it. It was a small act of personal archivism. He wanted proof that he had once understood something most of his colleagues could not put down in words. The student copies the line into a notebook. The student will write a thesis one day. He will quote it. It will appear in a chapter titled "Continuity and Conflict in the West German Police, 1945 to 1970. The abstract will say, based on personnel files, use of force reports, and oral histories, this study explores the tension between institutional continuity and democratic reform. The footnotes will include LA Berlin, A Rep. 35-8, and Bundesarchiv, B-Den 6. The student will feel he has done something precise. Karl will feel he has put something down that could be lifted by others. It is tempting to classify him, to make him an example of continuity or reform, of shame or denial, of batons or bread. The archives resist temptation by being dull. The dullness is a virtue. It forces us to do the mathematics rather than tell the story in one long sentence. He did not chase students out of lecture halls in 1937. He was a boy then. He chased them in 1968. He did not man a checkpoint in Poland. His father did. He manned a line at Kochstrasse. The uniform is similar. The law it represents is not. The baton hurts when it strikes. In 1968, it hurts in defense of a building and an order that is not planning mass murder. This should not put a halo over a helmet. It should place us in the difficult arithmetic of a state that is both burdened and new. In his later notebook, in a hand that shakes, he writes one last paragraph. It is precise. It contains the same short sentences as the first line. He writes, 8 May 1945 was a beginning. It was also an end. We learned to breathe in dust. We learned to count calories and cigarettes. We learned to answer questionnaires with care. We learned to take orders and then to question them. I wore a uniform because the city needed order. I believed that then. I believe it now. I also learned that order can be a word that hides many things. In 1968, I did not know how to explain that in the street. My father wore this uniform for Hitler. I wore it for the basic law. My son called me a fascist, and then he called me for help when his child was sick. We ate together. We argued. We did not finish. The war after the war was in our heads and in our papers. It did not end with a treaty. It ended when we died. In the final entry, he repeats the line that opened this telling. He underlines the last sentence twice. For Karl, the front line after 1945 ran through his memory and his paperwork, not across a battlefield.